See if that works. Yeah, perfect. Right, morning, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes and see if we get anyone come in, and then we will start the workshop. Right, admit some people in. Right, I think we've actually got most of the people in at the moment. We'll just give it one more minute and then we'll start. Okay. Jason, John, are you happy if I make a start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay then, so good morning and welcome to this year's National Landscape Awards workshop. We're delighted to have you join us on this virtual platform. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Izzy and I've recently joined BALI as their new events manager. So I'm responsible for the National Landscape Awards, so it's my first year doing it as well. I will be presenting today alongside John Melmoe, who you can see on screen now, who is chair of the judging panel, and Jason Locke, who is one of the award judges as well. I'm just checking that is recording. Yeah, okay, perfect. So this workshop has been developed by the judges to provide you with insight into the judging process, as well as hints and tips on how to create a successful entry. Sorry, I'm just going to have to admit someone in. Perfect. But before we get started, I just wanted to take you through a couple of points. So the workshop is being recorded today to allow those who are unable to attend to view on demand, but also so that all of you lot that are here today can come back and watch this at a later date again. So, as well as this session, at the end of it, we're going to do a Q&A. So what I ask is if you have any questions throughout, if you can just pop them. At the top of your screen, you should see a Q&A box. If you pop them in there, and then at the end of the session, I will put them towards the judges. So hopefully that should have changed for you. Okay, so now that the housekeeping part has been covered, we can move on to today's agenda. So I'd like to take you through a short introduction to the awards, why entering is important to you and your company, and also how to enter. I'll then pass over to John and Jason, who will cover what you should be including within your submission packs, the judging criteria and score reports for each category, some simple steps to follow when submitting your entry, and some hints and tips to ensure your photography and videos are top-notch. So, to provide a short introduction for those who may not be aware, the National Landscape Awards provides the industry with a platform in which to showcase and improve their business and celebrate achievements both within and outside of the industry. Now, in its 49th year, the awards started from very humble beginnings and have grown not only in the number of entries and attendees, but also stature within the industry. This is no small part thanks to the commitment of the members, and it's now recognised as the largest landscape awards in Europe. So this growth has seen the introduction of new categories and categories that we feel represent the whole of the landscaping industry, but most importantly, our membership base. These categories are also reviewed each year to ensure they stay relevant and changes are made when necessary. The growth also means that winning a national award promises to change the way that you and your business are seen within the industry. Members continue to enter because they find a benefit in doing so, whether that's increased promotion or simply a way of celebrating the wonderful work you and your staff achieve. So, the big question, why enter the National Landscape Awards? The entry process does take thought, consideration, time, and money, but the benefits most definitely outweigh this. First and foremost, it showcases and highlights your commitment to excellence, not just within the industry, but to the general public and your clients. Lots of winners have reported, which I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear, an increase in inquiries after winning an award. But one statistic that I've heard, which I thought was amazing, was that a member saw an increase in inquiries of 24%. And to me, that just highlights one of the great benefits of entering. Of course, winning award also generates many additional promotional opportunities for you and your company, with our winners to ensure we gain as much coverage within the industry as possible. Here on the screen, you can also see a number of examples as well. So I'd like to talk you through the entry process now. It's really simple, and if you do have any questions throughout it, please just drop me an email and I'll be happy to help you with them. So it's really important that firstly you ensure you have reviewed and checked your eligibility against the entry guidelines document, which can be found on the awards website. If you just scroll to the bottom, you'll see a link for it there. Once you've done this and you're ready to start your entry, a link on the awards website will take you through to the entry system, and you'll see on the entry system the different categories you can enter. So what you need to do once you click on the entry system is register, and once you've done so, you'll be free to start making your entry. You can easily pick your category and it will take you through to the entry questions in stages. A top tip is for you to collate all the information you need prior to actually starting the online entry. So when you register, once you get through registration, you'll see all the different categories. If you click on the category you're interested in, you'll see a drop-down PDF come up. If you click on that PDF, you can download it and it has all the entry questions. And you can go through all of that before you actually have to start your entry. So it's a really good way to understand. And then the final section is the online entry, is for your digital submission pack onto the online entry system, sorry. So it's important to ensure all items detailed in the entry guideline documents are included within your submission pack. And the key thing here is that you only upload one PDF document. This just makes it a lot easier for our judges. After you do this, you'll also then be asked to upload your images, and these should be uploaded as a separate zip file. So then once you've done all this, click submit, and that's your entry complete. Your payments for your entry can either be made through the entry system or via the invoice if requested. If you are entering more than one entry, you can choose to either submit and pay for all your entries together or one at a time, whatever's easiest for you. If you have any questions throughout the process, like I said, just drop me an email or give me a call and I will be happy to help. So now that's me done talking. We're going to move on to talk more in depth about the requirements for each category. And I am pleased to introduce John Melmoe, who is chair of the judging panel, who will take over from here. Over to you, John.
Yes, good morning, everybody. And for those joining us north of the border, please could you send some rain down south? We're desperately in need of it. But welcome, everybody. As Izzy has said, this is really to give you some guidance and steer this whole workshop on years of experience, really, of how the judging panel has developed and how the whole process has evolved. And it gives you the opportunity of really bringing together different facets of your business to link and join in producing an entry document, which, if it is structured correctly, gives you a document not only for entering the awards, but it actually gives you a document that you can use within the business for further promotion. So there is a cost, as Izzy intimated, but if it's done correctly and to a high standard, you will find the document useful not only for the awards but throughout the business and promoting it with clients, etc. The list is detailed, and it varies slightly from category to entry category, but the key things that are really come across consistently is listed on the screen. Evidence of practical completion, i.e. when the work was complete, detailed specification, evidence of hidden work, clearly define the works undertaken by third parties, clean copies of relevant drawings. These are obviously submitted electronically now, but they should be just the key relevant drawings, not a whole host of all the contract documents or drawings, but representative examples. A financial summary, bill of quantities or invoices, depending on the complexity of the scheme. Minimum of 5 representative high resolution images, and the importance of these images will be covered by Jason a little bit further on. A minimum of 1 high resolution portrait image. What you should remember is these images are very important. If you can afford it, get them done professionally, but they are used through the presentation. They're used through the presentation at the awards. So, very high quality is to be encouraged. Before and after images to demonstrate the impact of the scheme is always useful, and then clear location and access details. Next slide, Izzy. The judges will visit every single site, no matter where it is in the UK, no matter how large or small, and each of them are given a thorough interrogation and the point of visit. The quality of the information is important. The interpretation of the submission should demonstrate the interpretation of the client's design brief, the complexity of the scheme. The quality of workmanship is paramount, so good images showing and highlighting the quality of the workmanship. Choice and selection of materials are important. Any challenges that you have managed to overcome, bidet access or ground conditions, etc. The client's satisfaction should be come through. Good use of innovation or technology should be highlighted, and then the environmental impact, and then strong design and implementation. All these things come together into your package and really start to set you apart from maybe some of your competitors. Next slide. This is basically just gives you a flavour for what types of things that the judges are looking for. This is a score sheet, but this is more of a crib sheet for the judge's visit. And this really just reminds the judge when they're away from the site visit of the criteria, then their initial markings on site. The process is that once the site's been visited, the judges make a report, and this report is submitted to BALI HQ, and then at the adjudication meeting that happens at the end of August, there is a debate between the judges as to the relevance of the scheme and the key elements of it. So this is very much just a critique for the judge on the site visit. And there is not, as the RHS has, maybe a single score. This is a debate and presentation at the end of the adjudication process. So I'd like to hand over to Jason now to actually run through design excellence. Jason, over to you.
Thanks, John. Right, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm just going to run through what you should consider if you're entering a design entry. The list is not exhaustive. There's many things that you can add to this, but the sort of really to reiterate the points that John's already made, it's all about clarity of information. The clearer it is in terms of the information you provide, the easier it is for the judge, whoever comes out to see the scheme, to understand intentions and also get a feel for the scope of the project. So the key things are to have very, very clear, informative description explaining the client brief, because we need to understand the design that we're looking at on the ground, and also in terms of the documentation that's been submitted, that we can see that the brief is met within the scheme and within the design. We need to understand the scope of the contract. It might be that it's a complete garden design or a design of a public space. But also it could be a part of a scheme. So we need to understand what the scope of the contract was, but also highlighting in terms of how you think you may have met or exceeded the client's expectations. So it's really important that we have that information. Again, as John mentioned, we need evidence of practical completion date. Now, if it's a very formal project, there'll probably be some sort of certificate to say that's been complete. But if it's a smaller scheme, then it could just be a letter from the client saying, you know, that the scheme's now complete, or it could be a final invoice. It's just something that tells us that the scheme is now complete. Again, specification, that's important. We need to understand what the specification was for the project, and we need to understand that the extent and detailed nature of the specification that was submitted. Again, any unusual features or unexpected problems, how they were overcome. I know that's perhaps more going into the construction side of things, but also it could impact on the design. It might be that a design intention couldn't be met because of something that cropped up unforeseen. It's then understanding how that was overcome and how the design perhaps reflected that change. So it's really important that we get all that information, and that can either be through illustrative through the drawings. But it could also be through how the communications with the client, the contractor that was undertaking the work. Evidence of underground works. You know, we never underestimate the amount of work that goes into a scheme. You know, they're all like icebergs. There's an awful lot of work that goes on under the ground that we never see. So detailed drawings that would explain the works underground, or photographs of works underground, because obviously when we're on site looking at the scheme, we don't see what's gone on underground. We can kind of take an educated guess, but it's good if we've got that information and that evidence of depths of sub-bases, unforeseen items that were underground that have been resolved. It's really important that we have that clarity. The other thing is works that are undertaken by third parties. So it could be irrigation, electrical work, it could be some form of plumbing, it could be, you know, anything that wasn't directly involved, but it affects the overall project. We need to understand, you know, how you interacted with those, what the process was with dealing with them, how they were within the contract. So it's really important that we have that information as well. So it's all builds a picture of that particular scheme. Again, financial summary and bill of quantities, very important. If you can, it will be interesting to understand the relationship of the design fee to the project. It's not important, we don't ask for it, but sometimes it's quite useful to understand you know, when we're looking at a scheme that's had lots and lots of plans done, to understand, you know, what the relevance of the design fee is in relation to that. And then, as John's already alluded to, the quality of the images. These are really important because these images are often used if the scheme is successful and it goes on to win an award. These are the ones that are used at the presentation event in December. So getting good professional photographs is key. If you can't get a professional photograph, just make sure that you've got, you know, photographs that are taken at the right time of day and they're good compositions. And again, key, a good before and after photographs. You know, we visit the site, we see what you've done as backed up by the evidence of the information that you provide, but we don't know what the scheme was like before. So we need to understand the change that's been made through that design process. And so the before photographs are really, really important. And probably the most important thing is a location map so we can find it. So that's probably the most important thing you can provide, because without being able to find the site, we're not going to be able to judge it. Next slide, please. Yeah, so looking at more detail of the information that we need, we're going to be looking at the spatial design of the scheme. So obviously we've understood the brief from the client because you've provided that, and then we're going to be looking at the how the design works on site. So is it a balanced layout? Does it work? Does it function? Is it aesthetic? And does it work practically within the site? So these are all the things that we're going to be assessing. So is generally myself and Robin Templer-Williams that tend to pick up the design schemes. Matt Nicol also picks up some as well, as we've got a design background. So those are the things that we are looking at as key things. Does the scheme work? Generally, if you walk into a garden and it fits and it works and it flows, that's some way into understanding that the brief has been met within the scope of the project. We're also looking at planting design and the composition. So it's really important to understand, whether it's the right plant, right place. So we need detailed plans, planting plans and plant schedules. We'll then assess whether we think the planting is correct for the site. And obviously that does slightly dependent on the client brief, because the client may be very dominant in terms of what they're looking for. But we need to understand, whether the client's intention has impacted the type of plants, or whether it's the plants have been designed correctly for the scheme. So that's something else that we're looking at. Hard landscape design, again, we're looking at the quality of the materials, the choice of materials, whether they work together. We're also looking at the attention to detail, and whether that attention to detail is picked up through the detailed drawings, and whether that translates then onto site. And then appropriateness to the site. So it's going back to this spatial design. Does it fit? Does it work with the architectural style, the period of the property, and ensuring that the materials are all in keeping? Again, this also reflects back to the brief, because quite often a client will be quite specific in their brief. That might not necessarily mean that it does fit with the architectural style or period of the property. But again, that's why it's so key to have a very clear brief, so that we understand, how this is led, and understand that the overall scope of the project. Because documentation now is all uploaded online, it's much easier for us. Before, we used to walk around with great bags full of drawings and specifications and things. It made it very difficult to assess things on site, but now it's all done on CAD. It's much easier, but as much detail as you can upload as possible. If there's lots of detailed drawings, pick out the ones that are relevant. We don't, as John said, we don't need every single drawing on that project, but we need the ones that are relevant to the points that you want to highlight within the scheme. We need a full set of planting plans. A topographical survey is useful, because we can understand how you've worked with the levels of the original site. And we just need to get a feel for the detail that's gone into that scheme to produce the garden that we're then looking at. Scopes of work and specifications, again, they're really important. We can understand the intention of the build. And then any documentation that's been supplied by other consultants, structural engineers, lighting designers, drainage, etc. Again, that all helps to paint the picture of what we're looking at in terms of design. Because we can all get carried away of looking at a beautiful garden, but what we're really doing is we're assessing the design and how well the designer has worked with that site and worked with the client's brief and delivered the garden that we're then looking at. Next slide, please.
Right, I'll pick it up from here, Jason.
Yep.
Thank you very much indeed. As we've alluded to, this preparing a submission pack is a great opportunity throughout the company for people to feed into it. I urge you to make this a team play. The worst thing that comes across is a submission pack that has been done by a business development manager, a PR company, who hasn't actually visited the site or has any in-depth knowledge of the scheme. It doesn't matter who pulls it together at all, but who feeds into that process is extremely important. And this does come through in the documentation. We want passion. We want enthusiasm. We want you to engage and involve the entire company as appropriate. Doesn't matter how large or how small it is, but the relevant people that played a key part in pulling together this project should be part of the process. So there are 9 simple steps to complete the submission pack. And there's a lot of repetition going on through these slides, but these are often overlooked. So it's vitally important that you, before you start pulling together your submission pack, that you actually do a bullet point crib sheet and actually cross-check against the guidelines that you've got every aspect covered, and then start pulling together your information. And the 9 items are very quickly: introduction to the scheme, explain the project, how good did you get involved with it, give a little bit of history, a little bit of context for the judges. Evidence of practical completion is a must. People say, oh, well, 12 months, isn't long enough to develop a scheme. Yes, it is. You now have the opportunity of submitting photographs right the way up until early September. So your submission pack goes in early summer, and the judges know and understand that some of the scheme may not be at its best in terms of colour, bloom, development, etc. It doesn't matter. They're experienced people. But you will then have the opportunity of right the way up until early September of showing the development of that scheme through the summer months. Detailed specification is vital. Evidence of hidden works, as we've covered, build the picture. It's very important that we understand and appreciate all the difficulties that you as contractors, designers, etc. have overcome. Clearly define works undertaken by third parties. Now, this is important because if you are claiming or alluding that you've done works that you weren't actually part of your contract, you will be found out. The judges visit, the judges interrogate clients, etc. So be honest, be truthful, and only define the works that you've installed. Clean copies of relevant drawings, well, these are all uploaded now, so they be seen on screen by the judges. Financial summary, bill of quantities, etc. Images, again, we've worked on those, and Jason will cover those later. And clear location and access details. What needs to be remembered, and this last point is important, the judges give their time freely. It's an unpaid position. It takes weeks of their summer to actually pull together and inspect these schemes. So when they are making an appointment with you, please respect the time frame that they are giving you. They have got a number, maybe up to 15, maybe 15 to 18 schemes to see, and they need to schedule their time appropriately. So please flex with them where possible and accommodate the dates and times that they are giving you. Clear location. Several times we've been given the incorrect postcode, and the judge is sitting down the road in a different outside a different property than the address that should have been given. So cross-check the postcodes, etc. of the location when you actually put them in your submission pack. A clear Google map or similar showing a location is extremely useful to the judges. And clear access details. Now, access details vary from scheme to scheme, but if you need to get security clearance for the judge to attend and inspect a project, then please do this in advance. Do not have the judge hanging around for an hour or so waiting to get the appropriate pass to get into a government building or onto a particularly sensitive construction site. It's a waste of his time and effort, and it should have been addressed beforehand. So please respect this and ensure that you have got the correct access details and permissions before the visit. Next slide, please. So here we would take you through a scheme that was submitted a number of years ago now, but this gives you a flavour for the types of things that we were saying. This is step 1 of the 9 that I alluded to earlier. This gives a background to a scheme in the centre of London, the walkie-talkie building. Sky Garden was put on the top before Sky Gardens became the norm. This is one of the first not the first, but one of the first in the country, and certainly in the City of London. It gives a bit of background to it, etc., and it gives a bit of the history and puts the building and the contract in context. Next slide, please. Evidence of practical completion here, quite a formal contract, and here you have an official certificate of practical completion, very formal. It doesn't have to be, as Jason said earlier, it could be a letter just handing the scheme over to the client on a certain day. It could be the final invoice for a smaller project, etc. It's just proof of when the scheme was complete, practically complete, and then that will ensure that you have complied with some of the guidelines. Next slide, please. Specification. This is important. We need to understand whether you're working to, for instance, to British standards, whether that's the basis that you were contracted upon. It gives us a flavour for the depths that you should have covered in your tender documentation, your whole understanding of the scheme, etc., etc. So it's very important, and some of them are literally one-page scope of works, others are very detailed. Just send what you were contracted to do. If it's only a short document, then so be it. If it's extensive, so be it. That's what you've contracted to do. So send that through as part of your submission pack. Next slide, please. Evidence of hidden works. Build the picture. All too often we can't see what's under the ground, as Jason said earlier. But with images, it tells you the complexity. It starts building the picture for the judge to understand the issues that you have overcome, load issues. So polystyrene blocks or void formers were extensively used. Well, of course, these are buried when we come to site to visit the completed scheme. Access issues, etc., etc. The complexity of the scheme, what your difficulties were. Build the picture. Don't make it up, but build the picture. It helps the judge understand the loops that you've gone through to actually achieve the finished product. Next slide, please. And then the clear definition of the third-party works. Now, in this image, it's not obvious what was undertaken by the contractors. So in their submission, they've done a red line drawing showing the steps to the left-hand side of the screen actually being constructed by others. The paving at the bottom level, the plaza, being done by others. And then they clearly defined in the scope of works what they were involved with and what they were engaged to install. So that's vitally important, because that image, you could misinterpret that and say that is the whole scheme, apart from the building structure clearly, but the whole scheme, the steps, etc. And in this instance, it was not the case. Next slide, please. So clean and relevant drawings are important. They show the complexity of the scheme, they show the topography of the scheme, etc. Detailed planting plans, etc. Elements which had to be undertaken on a D&B basis for the trade contractor. All important, all builds the picture. But don't over-egg it. Just tell and include exactly what you were engaged to do. And if it was down to you, where you had to take the risk, for instance, on structural calculations for walls, etc., then, beat the drum. Let us know about it. You taking risk, let's know and understand. We can appreciate the scheme better for understanding, what you've been involved with. Next slide, please. Financial bill of quantity, all these figures are fictitious, but this gives you a basis and an example of a condensed. This is the financial summary sheet. There's, behind this would be maybe 20, 30 pages of individual items, all feeding through to a summary sheet. We don't need all the 20 items, but we do need to understand the overall value of the contract to ensure that it's in the correct category. And if it isn't, you'll be contacted and you'd be with discussion. It may be moved to what is deemed to be a more appropriate category, but we need this information. It's part of the requirements for the submission, so let's have it, but let's have it in a workable, practical format. Next slide, please. Images, again, there's images within the submission pack, clear, high quality, with some atmosphere, some feeling, some people using the space in it. These all feed through to the awards process, and if successful, inclusion in magazines, brochures, etc. Next slide, please. So again, images, atmospheric images, these are all important. Here, obviously, a sunset over the city, casting shadows onto the scheme. It gives a different flavour, a different feel for it, and again, is important. All this is portraying a quality scheme, a quality submission, okay, and it starts setting you as a contractual individual company away from the pack. And this is what the importance of a good submission pack is. It's trying to get you noticed by the judges. It's trying to sell your services through the documentation, and to start setting you apart from the other entrants. So vitally important in my view, and we've seen the improvement year on year of the submission packs, and people paying far more attention to it than previously, which is fantastic. I'll be honest, it's really a joy to see, and some of these presentation packs that we had last year were absolutely knockout. Next slide, please. Again, get people in there, get atmosphere in there, people enjoying the space or the garden, etc. Whatever the project is, then get people in it, because these projects, these gardens are about people. Just photographs without people, are pretty flat. So it's good to have put people in there, get the contacts. Next slide, please. Atmospheric, different light times of day the photographs are taken. This all starts giving atmosphere to an empty space. So think about your presentations. Jason will talk about the quality of images that are needed later, but it starts giving a flavour for what's required. Next slide, please. Again, here you have, background shots, creating atmosphere, again, people in there enjoying the space, etc. So it is important, to get these images in there of a good quality. Next slide, please. And again, clear location, we've touched on this earlier, but here we have an excellent example. It's basically shows you exactly where it is, Fenchurch Street in the city of London. It gives you here, in this instance, not security clearance, but you do have to get booked in, get a specific time slot. So this was all done And basically you've got a meeting point for the judge, agree it with them, so meet at the entrance to the building or in a car park or whatever's relevant, and then make sure that you've got all the necessary clearances, passes, etc. in. So in this instance, you could turn up, you've agreed the location point, you've met with the contractor, you then taken through security or through the pass office and up to the project, and then without minimum delay. So next slide, please. So at this stage, I'd like to hand over to Jason to actually run through the importance of the quality of images, etc. Over to you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'd just like to row back to the design slides, just to pick up a point that I neglected. On the design submissions, obviously we do have an entry category for a joint submission of a designer and landscape contractor, BALI registered contractor. I think the key thing here is that what we don't want to see is a regurgitated submission, either from the contractor or from the designer, and just put it into that category. They need to be distinctly different. So if you're entering the same scheme for just design only and then a design and contractor joint submission, they need to be different. You need to explain why the design was good from a design perspective, and then if it's a joint submission, why that scheme works as a joint submission. You know, what were the benefits of working together? They need to be different. What we don't want to see is the same scheme just bolted onto another category. So it's really important that there is that distinction. So in terms of photographs and videos, I mean, John's alluded to a lot of what we need in terms of quality of images. Landscape images are much better than portrait images. Obviously, you know, if we're putting them up on a big screen at the Grosvenor House, a landscape shot is much better than a portrait shot. So try and think about that when you're taking photographs. As higher resolution as either your camera or your professional photographer can achieve, because that gives us clarity and it allows the images to be blown up to a large scale and not look blurred or fuzzy. And obviously those images are then, you know, useful for you for future publicity and marketing purposes and any advertising that you want to do there and in. But just try and make sure you've got a good composition, so you haven't got a lot of blank space. And as John said, you know, where possible, you know, people enjoying the spaces, whether that's a public open space or whether it's a domestic garden. If you've got images where people are in them, providing that people are happy to be photographed, then it just shows that project is alive, rather than, you know, it can be a pretty picture, but it's relatively sterile. One key thing is to make sure that when you go to take the photographs, the garden's been you know, the lawn's been cut, the borders have been tended, you know, and perhaps set the scene, you know, do a bit of sort of set building. You know, if there's tables and chairs, make sure the cushions are on the chairs, you know, maybe have something on the table, just so that it creates a bit of atmosphere within the scheme. Next slide, please, Lizzie. So, for example, in this, the sort of bottom or the left-hand photograph, you know, it's just quite simple. You know, there's a hat and a pair of glasses on the table. It just looks like somebody's just got up from the enjoying the garden for a brief moment. It just creates a bit more atmosphere than just a sterile photograph. And again, the sort of before and after shots are really, really useful, because it just tells us how that space has changed. So if you've got lots of before photographs when you were doing the site survey and initial visits, when you take the finished shots or part way through shots, try and use the same camera angle, try and get the same height, try and, you know, so that there's a very clear transition from what was there before to what there is now. And then it's much easier for the judges to kind of understand the change that's taken place. And also when we're presenting back at BALI headquarters in late summer, you know, when we're presenting those schemes up for debate, we can use those images to say, well, look, you know, this is what was before, and this is how it is now, and this, you can see the transition, and it just helps paint the picture, as we've been saying all the way through. Next slide, please. The other thing is, if you're taking videos, videos are great, walk around videos. It just helps to understand the flow of the garden. But just also be careful that it doesn't sort of become something like the Blair Witch Project. If you're used to taking video, that's great. But if it's something you've not done before, just try and do a bit of practicing so that you can get a nice flow. Otherwise, if you've got a sort of very jerky image and you're constantly going down to your feet and then up in the sky, that doesn't help us at all. So if you've got a good eye for taking videos, also drone shots of gardens, fly-throughs. We've seen some really good presentations with that type of imagery, and again, it just helps everybody else who hasn't seen the garden, who hasn't been in the space, who hasn't sort of immersed themselves in that particular project. It helps to express that when we're presenting to the other judges. And as the text says on there, quite often less is more in terms of composition. Just try and create something which evokes the atmosphere of the garden. That's what we're trying to do. I mean, as a judge, we'll visit it, we'll see it, but for the other judges, they won't have seen it. So we've got to try and get that across to them. We can do that verbally, but obviously photographs help enormously. Next slide, please. Yeah, and if it's a relatively small space, as I said, make sure that the areas are addressed, they're not cluttered, and it just presents, how you want that scheme to be presented. It just helps us portray that image of the garden. Next slide, please. And a tip for taking photographs, depending, excuse me, where the project is, either first thing in the morning or towards the evening, sort of just before sunset, are the best times of day. Midday is generally the worst time to take photographs, particularly if it's high summer and the sun's blaring down, because you get a lot of light bounce and you get a lot of glare. First thing in the morning, you've got a very gentle light, and you can often get really good effects from photographs. And again, sort of late afternoon, early evening is good. And one thing, don't forget, if you've spent a lot of time and effort putting lighting into a garden, try and get some photographs to us of the lighting. I mean, obviously we're not going to be able to do that because we're not going to be at the garden at that time of night. But if you've got an extensive lighting scheme and it's something that's important to the project, then make sure that's photographed and presented. Because if you just say, well, yeah, there's an extensive lighting scheme, but we can't see how well that's been done and what impact that has to the project, then it's very difficult for us to portray that again when we're talking to the rest of the judging panel back at Stoneleigh. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'll take it from here.
Yeah.
Jason, thank you. I mentioned earlier about involving the whole company, and this here is a bit of fun, but it's also an example of the company site team being aware that the scheme was going to be put in for an award. Now here they had the opportunity of putting a camera onto the jib of a crane. These trees were meant to be lifted up under using the internal lifts, but an opportunity arose to use the tower crane before it was dismantled. A special tower crane that was designed for this scheme was actually a self dismantling one down through the lift shaft, because no mobile crane could get to close to this building because of its shape. So here the site team strapped the camera on and they are lifting the plants up through there on the outside of the building, and you will see shortly the guys with sucker pads on the roof of the building ready to guide this in. But the key question is, have they left a large enough gap for this plant to go through? This is a very testing moment and a very tense moment. Will it fit? That's the question. Have fun when you do your presentations and portray some unusual aspects in your imagery if you can, in simple footage like this. Again, there it is. It fitted. So this is a key collaboration on-site team fed this back to the office for inclusion or possible inclusion in the submission. Team effort, great fun. Jason, over to you.
Yeah, so finally, just looking at the photography and videos, as I said, video and drone footage, if you're competent and you've got people within your team that can do that, or if you want to hire somebody in to do it, that's great, because it helps with the rest of the judges back at Stoneleigh when we get together in late August to be able to walk through a garden. It helps enormously, and obviously we're portraying. If it's a scheme that I've been to, I'm explaining what I've seen, what I thought about the scheme. I submit my own photographs as well as looking at the photographs that came with the entry. But if you've got a video or a drone footage, then that helps just to elevate that submission. So well worth doing if you've got the ability to do it. But obviously, we need to make sure that you've got the relevant permissions. Some sites we know can be quite sensitive, either from a government building perspective, or some clients can be very sensitive about what is seen and what isn't seen. So we just need to make sure that we've got permission to have those photographs and to use them. If it's a professional photograph, we need to make sure we've got permissions from the photographer who took them for them to be reused, and there's no copyright issues. And then again, just make sure the owner and the client is happy for a photographer to come in and take those photographs. It's really important that those permissions are in place. If you can get a great set of photographs, it helps enormously, as I said, when we're back at Stoneleigh, to help present that project to the rest of the panel. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'll take it from
to
here,
John.
Jason. Okay, thank you, Jason. Finally, there are a number of categories to deal with suppliers, to deal with employer excellence, etc. And again, the process is very similar to that of the main awards, and that is that there is an exhaustive list within the entry guidelines, and basically just download the entry guidelines for the supplier, employers packages, and just make a note of what's needed to be included within the submission pack. 2,000 words doesn't mean 3,000 words. So respond to what the key brief is, a 2,000 word description of the product or services. Evidence of customer retention. All too often, the items have said, yes, we hold on to the customers dearly, they keep coming back to us, but they're not evidenced. So if it's asked to be evidenced, then it must be evidenced, otherwise you'll be marked down. Examples of your products, etc. One would think that would be, if you're a supplier, that would be a logical requirement, but all too often people think, because of the name or the brand, that everybody in the industry knows what they're about. If you're asked to submit examples of your products, then please submit examples of your products, literature, etc. Don't just assume that you're a well-known name in the industry and therefore you don't have to do it. Everyone knows who you are. Evidence of how you use the BALI network to grow your business. This is important. Any of your involvements in the regional and national events, important. Evidence it, please. Submit the evidence. Demonstrate that you're working with the BALI network and the BALI members. Keeping abreast of your latest products and technology, etc., and details of your customer specialist training, all necessary. These are simple key items, should be part of your submission pack, etc. Just make sure that they are supported with the evidence, clear, definitive evidence as requested. Next slide, please. Exactly the same as previously. This is slightly different requirements, but the supplier exceptional pack, these are the items that are found in the entry guidelines. And again, it's vitally important that they are clearly defined and submitted. Next slide, please, Lizzie. And this is the types of score line that these are, unlike the main awards, these are given a number, and there's several judges that view this, and the scores between the judges are amalgamated, and then the mean of the scores feed through to who's awarded and who isn't awarded. So you can see that if you neglect to evidence, for example, customer retention, it's going to impact heavily on your score line. So any item that you've been asked to provide evidence or clear literature or information about your company, please do it, because it will impact on your score. So this is an example of the score line. And it is important that if you don't show the evidence of it, it's no good saying that you support a particular charity in words. You need to demonstrate that you actually support it, and therefore, you know, avoid getting a low score for that element. Next slide, Izzy. Employer excellence, again, this is quite repetitious in some of these elements, but get the entry lines, do the bullet points, the key bullet points, and then ensure that your submission encompasses these requirements. Clear mission statements. It doesn't have to be padded out with flannel. If you have a simple mission statement and a simple company vision, just a few words, that's absolutely fine. If you've got a massive A4 mission statement, well, submit it if that's what you use, but don't feel that you have to go and pad it out because you feel that your small paragraph is insufficient. If that's what you use within the business, then submit it. So next slide, please, Izzy. Again, the employer's excellence, the policy on career progression, clearly define it, matrix training, recognition of service, what you do for staff if they stay with you for a long time. If you do nothing, then say you don't do anything. If you give them a gold clock, then say you give them a gold clock. Don't feel that you have to create something if you don't do it. Just be open with what the company policy is. Sample jobs description, etc. All these testimonies are all clearly defined within the guidelines. So I'll hand you now back to, sorry, one more slide just to show the judging the score lines. Again, as previously, the items that are required, if they're not there and they're not evidenced, they will impact on your score line. And again, whilst it's the mean of the scores between the various judges, then this, if the information isn't there, you will be marked down. And that's as simple as that. So ensure that you take care and comply with the guidelines. So I'll hand you back to Izzy now.
Fab, thank you, John. Right, thank you, everyone. We're just going to do a quick Q&A. Let me see if we've had any questions come through. So the first question we've had come through is, do we need to send photos as a PDF? And that would be that actually they need to come through as a zip file. So they can come through as your JPEG, your PNG, but they'll just need to come through as a zip file. So your submission entry pack is your PDF, and then your images, put them all into one file and put that as a zip file. And then we've just got some questions that have been asked previously, which we thought might be good to go through again. So this is just to John and Jason. First question is, as a small domestic contractor, how can I make my scheme stand out from others?
Do you want me to answer that, John?
Yes, please, Jason.
Yeah. So I think the key thing is just attention to detail. So what makes your scheme? Why did you want to enter it in the first place? So there must be something within that scheme that you thought, this is a really good scheme. I think it could, win an award. Well, focus in on the detail. Focus on the relationship perhaps you've had with your client or the designer, depending on the category that you're entering. and really focusing on the the quality and the detail of the workmanship. That's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the overall design, the overall aesthetic of a scheme, but we're also going to be looking at the quality of the build. So it's, joint size, it's relationship and materials, it's the quality of finish, it's how well the planting has been put together and how well that's performing and what we think it will do in the future. It's all those things. So, just because it's a small garden doesn't make it any less important than a larger scheme, because basically we're still going to be looking at those exact same things on a larger scheme as we would be on a smaller scheme. So it really is, and I think with small schemes it's even more important that attention to detail and the quality of finish is there. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Next question I've got is, what can I expect on a site visit? Will I be asked any specific questions?
I'll take that, Jason.
Yeah.
Will you be asked any specific questions? No, you'll be interrogated nicely. You'll be interrogated. You'll be asked by the judges for you to present the scheme. Tell them why it's special, what the items that you've overcome, why you've enjoyed the scheme, how your site team have got pulled together to develop it. So it's not a set criteria of questions. It's to be led by you in many respects. You tell your story. You convince the judge that your scheme is special and explain why it's special on the day. If your client is there, then great, your client can feed into it. It's not always possible and it's not always necessary that the client is there, but if they are, then fine. It's absolutely great. Don't come with a whole entourage. Sometimes been met with maybe up to 10, 12 people. It dilutes the visit if you're not careful. So just the key people, the contracts manager or the owner of the business, the site foreman, whoever's going to show us around, whoever's going to be able to sell the scheme to the judges or the judge, then that's what's needed. But no, there is no set format for questions on the day. It's very much a natural flow. Have fun, enjoy the visit, make sure the scheme's presented and well, cut the grass, do the edges, etc., etc., sweep the pavement, make it special, and do the preparation for the visit, and it will go fine. Next, Lizzie.
And then another question is, if I enter a scheme into a category, can it be moved at a later date?
I was just going to say, I think quite often what happens is we'll visit a scheme, and either during the visit or either prior to the visit, during the visit or later at the deliberation, we might actually think that the scheme would be best suited in another category, or if at a later date the person who entered has thought, hang on reflection, it might be better. If it's possible to move it, then and we've got agreement with the rest of the judging panel, then yes, I don't see any reason why that can't be moved. We've also moved schemes which we felt that were in the wrong category during the deliberation process, and we've actually contacted people during that time to advise them that we think it should be moved, and it's under their we can recommend it. It's up to the person submitted to agree to that. So in answer to the question, yes, it is possible.
Great, thank you. And just two more questions. What advice would you give to someone applying for the first time?
Do it.
Yeah, no, do it. It's the cheapest form of advertising that you will ever get, and that's why it's vitally important that your submission pack is well thought through and well presented. I can assure you the exposure that you get through advertising, through the BALI awards brochure, etc., on the day at the Grosvenor House, it far exceeds the entry fee. And people sometimes crib and moan about the entry fee, which is, in my view, extremely low. But the benefits for actually getting a BALI award for the business, for the individuals within the company, far exceeds the entry price.
I think just to add to that, John, I think the having entered a BALI award in a past life, to stick your head above the parapet and be judged, I think it's quite a brave thing to do, and I think it's very, very worthwhile because you're being judged amongst your peers for the quality of your workmanship and the expertise of your design. If that's a design entry. So I think it's well worth doing. And the other thing you've got to remember is that at the end of the process, whether you are lucky enough to win or be put forward for an award or not, you get feedback, and feedback is really important. I think if you've got feedback, good or bad, it helps you to grow and helps you understand what you need to do perhaps next time. And I know from my own experience, having feedback is vitally important.
Yeah. We've actually just had a couple more questions come in. One is from Rachel, and it says, when does the scheme need to be completed by for submission this year? So I can answer that one. It will depend on the scheme, but if you go onto the entry guidelines in each category, it has the final deadline. It's on the bottom right of each page, so if you just look on there, you'll be able to see that. And then another question is, how does artificial grass affect the scores?
It doesn't. It's dependent on its use, I guess. But I mean, we don't have any, if it's relevant to the scheme and therefore was a part of the specification or the brief from the client, then there's no issue with artificial grass.
Okay.
Do you agree with that, John?
Yeah, it's about appropriateness,
Yeah.
really. At the end of the day, if it's not a design scheme and it's a contractor installed scheme, if you're contracted to install it, then you're complying with the specification. That's what the client wanted. That's what you've been engaged to do. So you're not marked down for that. If it's a design element, then that may be a slightly different question, and that comes back to the appropriateness of it. But it also, the judges have to be practical. If you've got a very tiny, small garden on a roof terrace and you've got a dog or something, and it's possibly not practical to have a natural turf there, and therefore it is appropriate. So it comes back to how appropriate is it. But if you're contracted to install it, the judges aren't at liberty to mark you down, and they don't.
No, in fact, last year, I think it was Garden Club London. They had a scheme which won a couple of awards, and that was exactly that. It was a podium build, domestic garden, but there was a basement underneath the garden, and the only possible solution was to use an artificial grass, and worked perfectly well. It was completely appropriate, and it fitted the brief and the scheme.
Perfect, thank you. And then one final question, and I know this is really important for you judges, but why is it necessary to consolidate the submission document into one PDF file?
I'll answer that if that's okay, Jason.
Yeah.
The importance is that on the submission platform, if you put up each document as a single PDF, the judges have to download each PDF and read it individually. When you consolidate it and put the whole presentation into one PDF, the judges open one PDF file and then can go through, maybe it's 30 or 40 pages of it, but they've only downloaded one PDF and only opened one PDF. Last year, we had one situation where an individual company submitted 26 or so individual PDF pages. Now that means downloading 26 PDFs, it means opening 26 PDF, it becomes tedious, etc., etc. And it doesn't actually follow the guidelines. The guidelines say one consolidated PDF file and your images in a zip file, a separate zip file. So comply with that, but that's the reason why it's asked for, is the way the platform's set up, and it's to make life a lot easier and more practical for the judges.
Perfect, thank you, John. So I think that's all the questions done now. So just a huge thank you from me to Jason and John for taking the time to come on and present today. As I said earlier, if you do have any questions about the entry process, please just get in contact and I will be happy to help. And then one final point is that this year's ceremony will be taking place on the 5th of December at Grosvenor House in London. So pencil the date into your diary. And that's it from us. Take care, and we look forward to seeing all your entries come in. Thank you, Jason and John as well.
Thank you.